Hello music lovers and welcome back to the Woodshed. I thought it would be awesome this week to check out one of my biggest musical influences, and it's not really the traditional guitar player's kind of obvious choice, right? When we grow up and we're learning to play, we're always naming the same kinds of players, right? If you're a rock guy, you're naming Eddie Van Halen, you're naming Slash, Randy Rhoads, Eric Clapton. If you're a blues rock guy, you know, British Invasion, jazz, country, you know, all of that kind of stuff. We all have our favorite guitar players. One of my biggest musical influences is a guitar player, but he's more known as a composer. And his name is Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman got his start in a band called Oingo Boingo. But I got really hip to Danny in his compositions for movie soundtracks. You'll recognize Danny's work from great film scores like Beetlejuice, Batman. He did The Simpsons. I mean, he did a ton of really cool movies. He did a ton of movies with Johnny Depp. He did the Alice in Wonderland remake. And Danny has a really cool way of twisting the listener's ear. And I realized that I loved his music without really knowing anything about him or his history or even his name. I got into looking, I was like, man, all of these films and all these movies, I really love this sound. What is it? And I always equated it to like this carnival horror movie kind of thing. You can hear it in a lot of his music. And the song that I opened the set with, Of Elfin Man, is a direct tribute to Danny. And let's talk about some of the musical devices that Danny uses to kind of twist the ear. Let's start with, I think, the first time I became aware of Danny, and that is the Batman film. That's the Michael Keaton, the OG, the original one. And in this score, it has some really cool movements throughout different key centers. And also, one of the things that I love about Danny is he tends to break traditional rules of harmonic movement, okay? Typically, let's play in the key of B minor. If we're in the key of B minor, at least coming up as a bluegrass and country guy, that meant I had 1, 2, minor third, 4, 5, minor 6, flat 7, and 1. Another option would be a harmonic minor. And that has a major 7. That's like Yngwie used that a lot, right? Danny uses a cool method where he takes, if you're looking at B as the key center, right? And if you're going to play that 2, he plays that major. So we hear that in the Batman theme. It's kind of like this big B minor sound. Right? There's a nice suspension. And typically, we would still stay here. But Danny takes that last note and moves that up, and you get this sound. Right? And I always thought that was one of the coolest things. So what he's doing, it's like if you're taking a minor key center and you're playing your 2 chord as a major. All right. Next thing that he moves through in the Batman thing is he starts playing that motif and playing around with the motif of... So he's using all of those scale degrees, which is 1, 2, minor third, right? And then he starts dropping it in whole steps. So he uses this as a device. And then when he moves it again down another whole step, that puts it in G minor. And then he uses that device where he's got a new key center of G minor and treats that A minor that we previously played as a major. Right? So that's the main motif. What's interesting to me is, from my perspective, in a lot of rock music and pop music, when you have just like a minor chord, even in a blues, if you're going to play a blues in B minor, you're not really ever going to play an A minor or a G minor in descending whole steps like that. Like it's actually just treating everything as new keys. But he ties it together by using the same motif, right? It's interesting because here's his main theme. And then as he moves it around the different key centers, it creates a sense of downward momentum. And then when he finally chooses to resolve it, it's almost like that major 2, again, it's like now we're in the key of G minor, so the major 2 would be like A major, right? It's almost like now that A chord has a sense of not a triumphant heroic, but almost like a turn. And I think it's really cool the way Danny uses harmony in a way to where it paints a picture, right? That's really what music is all about. And it's interesting to me that when his compositions kind of unfold, it's like there's always this forward momentum to him. He doesn't stick around too long in one key. He uses devices like whole tone scales. You know, he moves everything. He takes entire motifs and just shifts them. A lot of times, his transitions are very harsh and abrupt and instant. And that creates a sense of chaos, which I always thought was very, very cool. Okay, so you may be wondering how you can incorporate some of that stuff into your own playing. Well, in Elfman Man, the homage to Danny Elfman, I used a similar technique, obviously, to pay tribute to the guy. The song is out of A minor, right? So my A minor scale. And then immediately, and very harsh, I used an F minor chord. F minor does not share a lot of similar tonality with A minor. You can hear it. And that creates a lot of that instant abruptness that you get in the Batman theme. One of my favorite quotes from Danny is like he's always looking for a sound. So he's not necessarily looking for a specific rhythmic device or a specific harmonic device. He's looking for a sound and a tone, you know what I mean? And certain instruments like woodwinds have a certain tone. And then when he incorporates the harmonic choices that are tense, right? It creates its own identity, right? My main riff from Elfman Man, that's actually in my head meant to be a woodwind part, right? I can hear it in my head being like that would be played on flutes and clarinets, right? And so when that really harsh change happens where we go from A minor to F, I still hear those woodwinds playing that. So that's a direct comparison of the influence that I got from the Batman theme and how I incorporated it into my own compositions using some of the similar harmonic ideas, like moving your key center from one minor to another minor chord that they don't share a lot of similar harmony. So obviously Danny's musical influence from the Batman theme rings out on me big time. You can hear it obviously in Elfman Man, but even in a song like Dracula and his kooky spooky band from Caught Between Truth and Lie, shameless plug, I used a lot of the similar devices from a theoretical standpoint to kind of build these quirky melodies that don't really make sense to the listener as they happen, but they create a chaotic emotion. And I love it. Let's dive into another one of Danny's most famous pieces of music, and that's The Simpsons. First off, it's basically a great example of raised fourth or Lydian harmony. A lot of you 80s shredders are going to recognize this kind of harmony from Joe Satriani and guitarists that have used that kind of structure in the way that instrumental guitarists do. Well, what Danny does that's really unique, again, is he's constantly changing key centers. Let's take a look at some of the things that happen in the Simpsons theme. So right out of the gate, we hear the main theme, and it's easily identifiable as a C with a raised fourth. Right? So that's easy enough to kind of understand as a guitar player. You have 1, 2, 3, raised 4. So all your Fs are now going to be F sharp. 5, 6, 7, 1. Speaking intervallically, of course. What gives this a really cool spin is the fact that immediately coming out of that sound, he lands on a B major. So you get this sound. To that, and he uses a sneaky little device on the back of the melody, which is now the last note that he plays in that melody is like a dominant 7. So now we've went from to this, and basically he's outlining his transition to B. Right? So let's take a look at it again. So we play the melody. And you don't even have to really apply the melody note for note to kind of understand what's going on. You're playing some stuff that's Lydian. And then when he's ready to make that transition to B, he frames it by dropping down to a dominant 7. So essentially you're getting this. Now we have a new key center of B. As the melody unfolds throughout the score, he comes back to the theme. Again, just like the Batman thing, he finds little motifs and he stays on. So now he's in B, and he plays that little motif again, but he plays it a lot more triumphant with a different spin on the rhythm. And then he uses it to get to E. And that's where it all lifts up, okay? But when he gets to E, instead of just relying on the rule of like, I'm only going to play Lydian, like he had been doing, now he steps into the world of whole tones. If you listen in the background, one of my favorite licks that Danny Elfman ever did was, and it's in several different movies. I think it's in the Beetlejuice theme at some point, but he does it in the background of the Simpsons theme. And it's too cool, man. So what do we learn here? We learned that he's kind of breaking all of our thoughts about which chords we're supposed to go to. Typically in the key of C, using this Lydian thing, we would be going to G. And that would be where C is a 4 chord of G. And that's how that would typically be used. Okay? Typically, that's how that's used. Danny says, screw that. When we get to that B note, it's going to be a B major. And it's really cool the way he frames his target note. So look at how I'm saying, when I say framing it, he's taking where he's at in C, C Lydian. He's playing C Lydian, which normally has a B natural in it. And he frames it by dropping down to a B flat. And that sets us up for that transition to B natural. So he goes to switch keys. I think it's super, super clever. We could sit here all day long and go through all of Danny's bodies of work, and it would be the most fun. It's really rewarding to me every time I listen to his scores, because every time I listen, there's some new little device or some new little trinket that's hidden in there in the layers of his work. And it's always like a treasure hunt, right? That I'm trying to like listen for something that I haven't heard before. Danny's music can be a bit advanced when you're trying to apply it to your own playing. Here's one of the things that I like to do to implement it and make it fit better. You take one device that he uses, right? Whether that be the Lydian scale, whether that be moving a motif in whole steps, or using the whole tone scale, and you sneak that into your own compositions or improvisations. So what do we learn about Danny today? We learned that he's super gluing a lot of his stuff together by finding a simple motif that he likes. Or the Simpsons thing. And he moves that into different chords. When he gets to a new chord, he treats that as a brand new key center. So there's a couple of things you could take away from today. One, check out Danny Elfman, check out the scores. One of your favorite movies is probably Danny Elfman. All right. The next thing, after you discover him and you start really falling in love with his music, look at his motifs and how he uses the same motif in different whole step movements, right? That's like a great example in the Batman. Drops it to A, right? Drops it to G, and then to A major. Another cool thing that Danny does is the use of the whole tone scale, like in the Simpsons theme. And if you've never heard the whole tone, all that is just a scale built up entirely of whole steps. So it sounds like this. It's got several different shapes that you can use. Here's one shape. I like that shape because it can be sequenced really easy, right? So Danny's usage of whole tone can be really interesting, and you can find different shapes across the fretboard because the scale is simply made up of all whole steps, right? Really, really cool sounding stuff. Also, remember that you can get a really neat sound by using Lydian instead of going traditionally, treating Lydian as a 4-chord. You can use Lydian and just very harshly move it back a half step and play a major chord. So in closing, I guess one of the things to take away from everything that I've been talking about with Danny is for all the rules that we build in our heads, and all of the things we tell ourselves we have to do as musicians for something to be good or acceptable, Danny breaks all those rules, and he does it in such a really, really cool way that he says, why can't I play C sharp 11 and then go to B major? He says, why can't I play, a B minor chord and then play C sharp major, right? All of these devices that he does, it's almost like he's intentionally trying to find a more angular, chaotic route to take to paint a picture for the characters on screen. I really love Danny's music, and I can't stress that enough. I hope you guys go check it out. I hope you dug this episode of The Woodshed. It's a little something different. I'm always trying to mix it up and kind of bring something different to the table for you guys week after week. If you like what you see, you can help support me by clicking like and subscribe and hit my Patreon. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next week.